There was an army that didn't conquer the ancient world by being the largest, but by turning war into a system. While other nations fought with fury, Rome fought with discipline. While other armies improvised, Rome marched, built, and destroyed with precision. A legion was not just a group of soldiers. It was a human machine. And when it appeared on the horizon, many enemies understood something before the battle even began. Rome had already arrived. For centuries, Rome dominated the known world not only through its emperors, its laws, or its cities, but through an institution that became the heart of its power, the Roman army. From the hills of Italy to the sands of North Africa, from the shores of Britain to the frontiers of the Euphrates, from the forests of Germania to the deserts of the East. At its peak, the Roman Empire controlled more than 5 million square kilometers. Millions of people lived under its rule. And behind that power were soldiers capable of marching, building, enduring, adapting, and conquering with an efficiency the ancient world had rarely seen. But the question isn't just how they won. The real question is, why did they keep winning again and again? Was it their weapons, their discipline, or their ability to learn even from their worst defeats? The answer is all of that, but bound together inside a system. Today, we're going to take that machine apart piece by piece. We're going to look at how a legion was organized, how a legionary fought, what made their formations so dangerous, why their discipline was feared, and how their engineering turned roads, bridges, and encampments into weapons of conquest. This is the Roman army. To understand Rome's military power, you first need to understand its greatest creation, the legion. But the legion wasn't born perfect. Rome shaped it over centuries, through wars, defeats, and reforms. Every change made it more flexible, more professional, and more dangerous. A legion was not simply a group of soldiers gathered under the same banner. It was a unit capable of moving, fighting, building, withstanding a siege, and surviving far from home for years. In many ways, it was a complete army in miniature. During the imperial era, a legion typically had between 4,800 and 5,200 heavy infantrymen. But its true strength wasn't in the numbers. It was in the way those men were organized. The legion was divided into 10 cohorts. Each cohort was made up of centuries, and each century held around 80 soldiers under the command of a centurion. There was one notable exception, the first cohort. It was the elite heart of the legion, made up of twice as many men as the rest, around 800 soldiers, the most experienced and battle-hardened veterans, held in reserve for the most critical moments of battle. When the first cohort entered combat, everyone on the battlefield knew it. But the smallest unit, and perhaps the most human, was the contubernium. 8 men who shared a tent, food, marching, training, and danger. Those 8 soldiers slept together, cooked together, carried part of the same equipment, and depended on each other to survive. Because on the battlefield, a legionary didn't think about the empire as an abstract idea. He thought about the men beside him. The 7 companions who could cover him with their shields, push him forward, or drag him out of the fight if he fell wounded. Rome understood something fundamental. Discipline begins in structure, but loyalty begins in the small group. That was the genius of the legion. Each soldier belonged to a small unit. That unit belonged to a century, the century to a cohort, and the cohort to the full legion. Everything fit together. And when thousands of men fit together that way, they stop being a crowd. They become a single body. But a legion wasn't made up of legionaries alone. Alongside the heavy infantry were auxiliary troops recruited from the provinces: Syrian archers, Numidian cavalry, Balearic slingers, scouts, light cavalry, specialists who brought skills that Rome absorbed from the peoples it conquered. That was one of Rome's great strengths. It didn't just defeat other peoples, it learned from them. If a region had excellent horsemen, Rome incorporated them. If another produced good archers, Rome used them. If a technique worked, Rome adapted it. The legion also included engineers, doctors, blacksmiths, carpenters, scribes, artillery crews, and officers dedicated to keeping the system alive. That's why a legion could arrive in hostile territory and depend on no one else. It could raise a camp, repair weapons, build siege machines, cut roads, cross rivers, and treat its wounded. It wasn't just a fighting force. It was an armed city in motion. And for something like that to work, the chain of command had to be clear. At the base stood the common legionary, the miles, a Roman citizen turned professional soldier. To join the army, you had to pass physical tests, accept years of service, and submit to a life of training, marching, punishment, and war. Above him was the optio, second in command of the century. And above both of them, the centurion. The centurion was one of the most important figures in the Roman army. He was not a decorative nobleman or a young aristocrat playing at war. In most cases, he was a veteran hardened by years of campaigning, chosen for his experience, valor, and leadership. He commanded from the front. You recognized him by his helmet, his authority, and the vine staff he carried as a symbol of command. With it, he corrected, punished, and reminded his men that discipline was not a suggestion. The most prestigious centurion in the legion was the primus pilus, the first centurion of the first cohort. His word carried enormous weight because he represented the living experience of the legion. Above the centurions were the military tribunes and, finally, the legionary legate, responsible for commanding the entire force. But what mattered wasn't just the titles. What mattered was that every man knew who gave orders, who obeyed them, and what he was supposed to do, even in the middle of noise, fear, and chaos. That clarity could decide a battle. Because when an enemy line broke, when dust covered the field, when shouts drowned out commands, the Roman soldier didn't need to improvise. He knew where he was. He knew who to follow. He knew what role to play. And that made the legion something far more dangerous than a large army. It turned the legion into human precision. Now let's come down from the system to the man, to the soldier who marched inside that machine. The Roman legionary was not a tribal warrior who relied on valor alone, or fury, or physical strength. He was a professional soldier, someone trained to repeat the same movements until they became reflexes. His equipment wasn't designed to look impressive. It was designed to serve an exact function. First, break the enemy line, then close the distance, and finally, kill quickly and efficiently. The first Roman blow often didn't come from a sword. It came from the pilum. The pilum was a heavy javelin, about 2 meters long. Its design looked simple, but it was brutally intelligent. When it struck an enemy's shield, the iron tip could penetrate it. Then the shaft would bend or hang limply, making the shield awkward, heavy, and useless. The enemy had to make an immediate decision. Keep the shield and be slowed down, try to pull the pilum out under pressure, or drop their main defense. Any of those options was bad, because the Romans were already advancing. After the pilum volley came the shield clash, and behind the shield, the gladius. The gladius hispaniensis, adopted by Rome after contact with the peoples of Hispania, was a short sword with a wide blade and a powerful point. It wasn't designed for elegant movements or long duels. It was a weapon for close combat. In an ancient battle, space was minimal. There was no room to swing a sword in wide arcs. The legionary fought shoulder to shoulder, protected by his shield, pushing forward and attacking with short thrusts, to the abdomen, to the neck, to the armpit, to any gap between shield, armor, and flesh. Romans preferred the point over the edge because a small thrust, well placed, could kill faster than a wide slash. The gladius was perfect for that. But perhaps the legionary's most important weapon wasn't the sword. It was the scutum. The scutum was the large rectangular curved shield that covered most of the body. It wasn't just for defense, it was an active part of the attack. With it, the legionary could deflect projectiles, protect a companion, push the enemy, disrupt a line, and create just enough space for the gladius to strike. At its center was the umbo, a metal boss that could strike the face, chest, or arm of an enemy with brutal force. Roman combat was not a dance of swords. It was pressure. It was weight. It was shield against shield. It was the enemy losing balance. And then a short thrust. Just one. Over the body, the legionary wore armor. In different periods, this could be a lorica hamata, chainmail, or the famous lorica segmentata, made of articulated iron plates. The galea helmet protected the head, cheeks, and neck without leaving the soldier blind to what was happening around him. And on his feet, the coligi, military leather sandals with studded soles, designed for long marches and built to last campaign after campaign. Because the legionary didn't only fight. He marched. He carried weapons, armor, tools, food, utensils, and stakes for building camps. All that weight could reach 20 to 30 kilograms. It was no accident they were called Marius's mules, after the reforms attributed to Gaius Marius, which made the soldier more self-sufficient and reduced the army's dependence on large supply trains. A legionary could cover long distances for days, arrive exhausted, build a fortified camp, and, if necessary, fight. That was the point. Rome didn't design just a soldier for battle. It designed a man capable of living inside war. The Roman equipment was effective. The organization was solid, but none of that was enough if, when battle came, every man acted on instinct. Rome's great advantage was turning combat into a sequence. First they observed, then they took position, then they advanced, then they broke through, then they rotated, then they finished the job. It didn't always go perfectly. Rome made mistakes too, and some were catastrophic. But its ideal was clear. Reduce the chaos of battle to repeatable movements. Before combat, scouts analyzed the terrain. Officers observed the enemy's position, their numbers, their flanks, their possible escape routes. The Romans knew that a battle could be lost before it started if the terrain was chosen poorly. Then came the deployment. One of the most important formations was the triplex aces, 3 lines of combat arranged to maintain constant pressure. The first line absorbed the initial shock. The second could relieve, reinforce, or exploit an opening. The third stayed in reserve for the decisive moment. That depth was psychologically devastating. Many enemies fought with everything they had from the start. If they managed to wear down the first Roman line, they discovered they hadn't defeated the army. They had only tired out part of it. Fresh men were right behind. A typical attack could begin with the legion's ordered advance. At a certain distance, soldiers launched their pila. Enemy shields were damaged. Lines opened. Some men fell, others stopped. Then came contact. The scutum struck first. The body followed with pressure. The gladius entered last. Everything was designed to reduce the enemy's freedom. Take away their space. Take away their balance. Take away their time to think. But Rome didn't win just by advancing head-on. It also knew how to use formations depending on the problem. The testudo, the tortoise, was one of the most famous. Soldiers formed a kind of shell with their shields, in front, on the sides, and above their heads. It was slow. It didn't work for everything, but under a rain of arrows, stones, or projectiles, it could allow a unit to advance toward a wall with impressive protection. Another formation was the cuneus, the wedge, a concentrated point of soldiers aimed at breaking a specific spot in the enemy line. If the line split, the opposing unit could be divided and lose coordination. But Rome's true tactical strength wasn't any specific formation. It was its ability to adapt. When Rome encountered a dangerous enemy, it didn't always defeat them immediately. Sometimes it lost. Sometimes it was humiliated. Sometimes it paid with thousands of dead. And no defeat marked Rome as deeply as Cannae. In 216 BC, Hannibal Barca, the great Carthaginian general, trapped a massive Roman army in a perfect encirclement. The Romans were surrounded and massacred. It was one of the worst defeats in all of Roman history. But Rome did not surrender. It did something more dangerous. It learned. It studied the enemy. It understood its mistakes. It changed how it operated. In time, what Hannibal had used against Rome became part of Roman military thinking as well. That was one of Rome's greatest qualities. Rome could be hit, but if it survived the blow, it came back more dangerous. Not because its soldiers were invincible, but because its system was alive. It learned, it corrected, it absorbed, and it advanced again. No military system works if the soldier breaks formation when he feels fear. And in an ancient battle, feeling fear was inevitable. In front of you were armed men trying to kill you. Around you were shouts, dust, wounds, blood, confused orders, companions falling, and enemies pushing with all their weight. Roman discipline existed for that moment. So the legionary didn't need to feel brave. He needed to rely on his training. A Roman soldier trained constantly. He marched, ran, swam, built, practiced with weapons, carried weight, and repeated maneuvers until his body responded before his mind did. Marches were essential. Soldiers had to cover long distances with full equipment, maintaining pace and formation. It wasn't just physical endurance, it was obedience under exhaustion. They also trained with practice weapons heavier than the real ones. The idea was simple. If the body got used to excessive weight, the real weapon would feel lighter in combat. The result was a soldier less dependent on impulse and more dependent on habit. But Rome didn't rely only on training. It also used rewards. A soldier could receive money, promotions, public recognition, or decorations for valor. Some military crowns were symbols of enormous prestige. The Corona Civica was awarded to whoever saved the life of a Roman citizen in battle. The Corona Obsidianalis was reserved for exceptional cases, when someone saved an entire unit from destruction. It wasn't made of gold, it wasn't made of silver. It was made of grass from the battlefield. And in Rome, it was worth more than any treasure in the empire. Honor mattered. But so did punishment. And Roman punishments could be brutal. Falling asleep on guard duty, abandoning your post, or showing cowardice could cost a soldier his life. Discipline was enforced not only from above, but also from within the group, because one man's failure could endanger everyone. The most famous punishment was the decimatio, the decimation. When an entire unit was accused of extreme cowardice or mutiny, the soldiers could be divided into groups of 10. 1 in every 10 was chosen by lot and executed by his own companions. It was not an everyday punishment. In fact, it was rare, but it didn't need to be frequent to be remembered. Its existence sent a terrible message. In the Roman army, collective cowardice could destroy even the innocent. That kind of discipline seems inhumane by modern standards. And it was. But within Roman military logic, it had a clear purpose: to make sure the fear of the enemy was never greater than the fear of breaking order. Even so, reducing Roman discipline to terror alone would be a mistake. The legionary also had identity, pride, and belonging. He belonged to a legion with a name, a history, symbols, and a reputation. He served for years alongside the same men. He shared hunger, cold, marches, victories, defeats, and plunder. The army wasn't just his job, it was his world. That's why Roman discipline was so powerful. It combined fear, training, pride, and community. And when all of that came together, the result was a soldier capable of holding the line where others would have fled. If discipline held the legion together, engineering opened the way. For Rome, building was not a secondary activity. It was part of war. A Roman army didn't just march through territory, it transformed it. If it needed a road, it built one. If it needed to cross a river, it raised a bridge. If it needed to sleep in enemy territory, it turned the ground into a fortress. If it needed to take a city, it built machines to break its walls. Roman roads were not just civilian infrastructure, they were military arteries. They allowed troops, supplies, messengers, and reinforcements to move at speeds many enemies couldn't match. A legion could appear where the enemy least expected it, because Rome had built the road first. And at the end of every day's march, the soldiers raised a camp. Not a scattered group of tents, a temporary fortress. It followed a standard plan. A ditch was dug. A palisade was raised. Internal streets were organized. Command positions, supply areas, spaces for animals, and tents. Even after a long march, even in hostile territory, the soldiers worked. That habit gave them an enormous advantage. The Roman army rarely slept completely exposed. Every night where other armies only rested, Rome dug in. And at dawn, it could pack everything up and keep moving. Engineering also served to send messages. When Julius Caesar reached the Rhine, he didn't settle for looking at the river or searching for an easy crossing. He ordered a bridge built over one of Europe's great natural barriers. He did it in a matter of days, not just to cross, but to show the Germanic tribes that no river was enough to keep Rome away. The message was clear. We can reach you, and we can come back whenever we want. But the most impressive example of Roman military engineering happened at Alesia. 52 BC, Julius Caesar pursues the Gallic leader Vercingetorix to a fortified city. Inside Alesia, tens of thousands of Gallic warriors are trapped. Outside, a massive relief army is approaching to surround the Romans. Caesar is caught between two enemies, one inside the city, one coming from outside. The normal solution would have been to retreat. The Roman solution was to build. Caesar ordered a line of fortifications built facing Alesia to prevent the besieged from escaping. Then a second line facing outward to defend against the relief army. Two walls, one to contain, one to resist. Rome turned its own position of danger into a massive feat of engineering. Ditches, palisades, towers, traps, obstacles, and kilometers of defenses raised by soldiers who were not just fighters, but builders of war. When the relief army arrived, Caesar wasn't simply waiting in an open field. He was inside a fortress his own men had created. And he won. Alesia captures better than almost any other battle what made Rome different. Other armies could have more men. Others could fight with more fury. Others could know the terrain better. But Rome could turn the terrain into a weapon. In the end, the Roman army was not feared because its soldiers were invincible. It was feared because it turned ordinary men into pieces of a machine that could march farther, endure longer, and come back more dangerous after every defeat. Rome fell. Its legions vanished. Its eagles stopped advancing. But the idea survived. Every modern army that organizes, trains, supplies, adapts, and corrects its mistakes still walks through a Roman shadow. Because Rome understood something before almost anyone else. War is not won only with courage. It is won with discipline, memory, and system. And for centuries, no war machine was feared more than Rome's.